So hello and welcome back to another Improvement Season podcast. This time it's not Mike sitting here, it is Pascal if you haven't already noticed. And on the other end, it's as always though, Steve Hall. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm well. Yeah, I feel pretty good actually today. I don't know if you asked me, I don't know if I talked about it, but a few weeks ago I was like complaining about being like just generally constantly fatigued. Yeah. And that's gone now. So I'm glad I've kind of caught back up on probably some sleep debt and dropped some fatigue. So that's nice. How's things on your end?
Yeah, you know it. But of course the listener isn't aware of that. I'm pretty tired right now. Just a week ago, that wasn't the case. Even though that we haven't recorded the Improvement Season last week because I was in the midst of traveling. At the time of leaving, I felt still fantastic. And then I started my back piece. So back piece in the sense of like tattooing the entire back and not just the back. It's also goes up to the head here as well. So like the entire back, so to speak. Ever since then, I'm very tired, which is probably though mostly due to a bad quality of sleep over the past couple of nights. Ever since, of course, a tattoo is quite an invasive procedure, especially when it's such a huge piece. And it was then ever since then I couldn't really sleep that well anymore, and I'm not as well rested. And over the past 3 days, the tattoo, weirdly enough, has been itching horrendously. And normally, Steve, you know it yourself, with a tattoo, normally, yes, it may itch every now and then, but it's not that big of a deal. You give it 1 or 2 slaps on the wrist or on the skin, and then it's a little bit better. But on the back, because it's the entire back, and I can't re-slap it, I can't re-scratch it or something like this.
Yeah, well, those scratching sticks you can get. You can't do that.
Awful, and I'm lying in bed, and my entire back is just itching the entire time. And I'm waking up in the middle of the night because my back is itching. And I really do hope that this will dissipate over the next, hopefully tonight, but this is something that I've said over the past couple of days.
There's obviously a phase to recovery, isn't there? I remember because I'm still early to getting tattoos, so I did loads of like research looking into like, what should I expect like day 1, day 2, day 3, and so you're in the like itchy, like, because when it's itching, that's like when, and this is like something your mum tells you. This is at least what I learned from my mum. She's like, if you're like a cut or whatever is itching, that's it recovering. That's why it's itching. I guess that is part of the process, but it's like an itching stage.
Yeah, because I wasn't really fully aware what is actually taking place when the body is actually having some itching sensations. It's just the body getting rid of old blood, for example, old also bacteria and possibly some viruses in that area as well. So it kind of transports all of the waste products away from that area, and also is recovering the tissue around that area and rebuilding it at the same time, which is then causing it. And this is why when it comes to also tattoos, that you don't want to scratch it, because then you're causing micro tears and micro fractures into the skin that is recovering at the moment. You're basically making it more vulnerable for then bacterial infection again and stuff like this. Found it very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's also interesting. Some people seem really like, the term I'm going to say is laissez-faire about training after getting a tattoo. Like they're just like, I go into the gym the next day, and I'm like, but like the stretching of the skin and all of that, like that feels like it's only just been put in there. It feels like that could impact the recovery quite a bit. And I'm just like, I'm always on the side of just being a little bit more cautious about that sort of thing. But I'm guessing, have you trained yet?
I have trained.
It's been almost a week now though, right? So
yeah, today is kind of, today is an entire week. And I was having like full 3 days of rest. So my first training session was again on Monday. The last tattoo session was on Thursday. So plenty of time. I had plenty of time. And the good thing is that while I was traveling, I was actually picking out a gym at location. So I was managing to get a training session in right before the tattoo appointment itself. So that then made it such that I could really just recover over the next couple of days without bothering too much with getting back into the gym. And on that Sunday, I was On Saturday, I was already planning to go back to the gym on Sunday, but then I woke up on Sunday and I was like, no, it's too early. And this is just listening to my body. I could feel like the wounds not being completely closed off. And I had the feeling that my skin is still a little bit too sensitive at the moment. That's why I gave it another day of rest. And it turned out to be the right decision. So on Monday, I was already a little bit more cleared, but you still have to make careful decisions around what exercises to pick. So for example, for the leg days, I was very careful not to kind of put any kind of pressure on my back. So no axial loading, and also not so much like sitting in a leg press and then letting the weight compress you into the seat. I was then going for leg curls, lying leg curls, so that my back isn't on the pad. I did leg extensions though, but it's not that the weight is pressing you into the seat. And then also I did Bulgarian split squats, for example, so that my back is free. And also there's not too much pulling on then the shoulders and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was trying to think. I was like, yeah, you can't do any kind of squatting variants. Apart, yeah, you belt squat might have worked, but it depends.
But my gym
your gym doesn't have one, of course. Yeah, so a question immediately comes to mind, because now you've done the back of your head and your entire back. Is there any? Are you looking to where is the stop for you with tattoos? Because this is a question I have for myself as well. Like, I kind of have like a short-term stop in terms of for competitive bodybuilding, but then I don't know where my long-term stop is. I don't know if you've thought about that.
The thing is that I was always convinced that I'm going to actually be quite covered. But then, as already alluded to, I think at some point, when you're younger, you don't have the money to actually spend on a lot of tattoos most of the time. Right? And if you do, then you are most of the time bound due to the tattoo artists in your local environment, because traveling is additional cost that you can't really afford. Once then you're starting to earn money, you don't have the time for it. You have the money, but you don't have the time to get tattooed, because most people are in an employed environment and they can't just like go to tattoo artists whenever they want to. They would need to take holidays, time off, and because of that, you are also quite limited. And in the past, I couldn't really be bothered taking holidays for stuff like this. And right now, it's a good combination of the two. And that's why, I don't know, there are certain body parts that I, right now, don't really find aesthetically pleasing to get that tattooed. So, for example, the quads and the hamstrings and glutes are just body parts I right now at least don't find appealing. And also I like, even though that I'm not the biggest fan of my front side, right, the chest and the abs, I like this to be clean and free at the moment. At some point probably I will get the chest done as well, but I don't know when. I would rather first start here on the sides. So one side I have already but not fully covered, but then I rather would start with the other side, the other calf, for example, my neck, before then starting with this one.
Is there any places that are just completely off limits? Like, you did the back of your head. What about the front?
Oh, yeah. So
the face.
Everything in the face is simply not my jive. I see that all the time. Sometimes there are people where I would even say and go as far as saying like, this fits you and suits you very well. It's kind of like people wearing glasses. It's just, for some, they have a glass face. For some, they have maybe a tattoo face where it really looks good. I can't see myself having any kind of facial tattoos. And also the armpits. I don't know. The studio manager of the tattoo shop where I was getting tattooed here last week, he is fully covered. And the last things that he got was in his armpits. And he was saying that this was the most excruciating pain that he's ever had in his entire life. They've tried everything. Numbing cream alongside with some over-the-counter drugs, and not over-the-counter drugs, prescription drugs. And also, this is something that I never recommend to anyone. Please ignore what I'm saying. But on top of it all, increasing the effects of those drugs with alcohol. And yet, he said it was the most excruciating pain that he ever had. He was crying while getting tattooed.
Oh my God.
And then it's just the question of like, why would I ever do this? Like, honestly.
Unless you're doing like a pull down or a pull up or a front double bicep, it's always hidden. And then
But
it's like,
the thing is, I'm very well aware of my current biases. And what I believe to be the case right now doesn't have to be the case in the future. So it could very well be that at some point I would even be tempted to do something like this. I don't know. Right now I can't see it, but it's also because I have still plenty of space to cover. We will see.
And I know.
What about you, Steve?
I was just going to, on the point of those numbing creams and stuff, you said the back is painful. Did you have any of that going on, or was that all just, you just took it raw or whatever it is?
I took it. I took it as a king. I'm a real alpha man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's so true about, and I think this is like I don't know if it's a deadly slope or a slippery slope. That's the term, isn't it? But like I got the first one, Vegeta, and I didn't have any intentions of getting more. And then slowly it's just continued and accumulated.
And then quickly after that, eh?
So, and I always said like, I'm not that big on like, what they called like calves getting covered. But after I was almost complete on my left forearm, I was like, definitely doing my calves. Like that's the next obvious place, especially for like bodybuilding purposes. So yeah, I've already kind of flip-flopped a little bit. So, but yeah, in the short term, like years, because I think it's basically taken me a year to get like half a sleeve on one arm, half sleeve on the other. And I quite like that, like splitting it up through the year. Like you said, it can take some time away from things.
And so, for you in particularly, Steve, and it's something that I said already, you have ambitions of turning pro, and you have a real shot at it, in my opinion, as well. And if you're serious about it, why would you miss that chance? If you can just wait for like a couple of more years before covering those important pieces of your body and your physique, you can still get the arms tattooed at the age of 45. Doesn't it have to be now? Not really, right? Because if you decide to do this, then you're also coming to terms with that you're not going to turn pro anymore.
Yeah, I think so. Although I was just talking to yesterday Peter Fitch, and it came up about tattoos because I brought it up because I always bring up tattoos. But he was like, if you use not dark as, why have I forgotten what it's called? It's the one that's
Dream
often
tan?
banned in show. Dream tan, that's the one. He was like, if you use dream tan, like it can completely cover tattoos. So you basically
I've heard
can't see
the
them.
same, but the thing is that in most European shows, as far as I'm aware, it's completely banned.
Yeah. So he was just like, you can ask the people running the show and see if like you ask and say, I'll be very careful. But I can imagine a lot of them are just like, it's a blanket, black and white, no chance.
Yeah, because why take the risk? You know, if you're making an exception there and something is happening to the location, because most of the time it's just out of the security measures for themselves, because that shit, when it hits the wall, is very, very hard to get off. And you are then liable as the organizer to come up for the cleaning costs, which can actually get quite expensive.
Yeah. So, it's exactly like you said. So in my eyes, like a couple of years, I'll have probably both of my calves covered, and then I'm like, it'll be paws. I don't know about feet. Like I've never been that keen on feet, but I'll probably change my mind on feet at some point. I'll be like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do my feet, because I can't do, like you said, above the knee and like above the elbows. Like it just starts covering definition. Yeah,
no, for me personally, at least, and this is just my own perception of things, what I find visually very appealing is when the forearms are covered, the calves are covered, but everything else is not. I don't know what it is, but if you have a proper physique, and I would say, Steve, your physique is very, very nice for this, like a proper chest, great abs, great like bicep, great back, hiding those behind tattoos, even though that I'm a big tattoo fan, it's just, I don't know. I find it, you don't have to, because you already have that amazing artwork that you've created and that you've worked for such a long time. And then covering it, well, I don't know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Of course, things change, perceptions, preferences, all the kind of stuff changes, and it could very well be that you're not as interested in revealing that physique anymore that much, and that you're more into tattoos. But it's just from my perspective, having kind of the calves and the shins alongside with the forearms and stuff, where there's not that much muscular definition for the vast majority of people, could enhance just the overall look of a physique.
Yeah, that's just an interesting point, because I guess it ensures it draws the eye away from those areas, because they're just blacked out basically. That's an interesting point. And with the final question on this, with the back of the head, is it will you let hair just grow over that, or will you rock you're not going to rock a shaved back of the head?
The funny thing is, and I just want to prepare all of the listeners for it, there will come a time next month, no, not by the time of the recording and when it's coming out, a little over a month from now. So at the end of August, we are probably starting then with with finishing the back. With finishing or starting then the head. Right now we have only the outlines, and it could very well be that at the end of August I need to completely shave my head, like completely shave it. And I haven't had a haircut, if you can call it a haircut, a haircut like this since I think 8 or 9. When I was that young, I had very, very short hair, just like shaving it off for like 6 millimeters or so, and that's it. Ever since then, I had always kind of full and longer hair. It's going to be an interesting one, especially with the mustache and everything. I think it's going to look quite interesting, aggressive. I don't know. I can't really predict, but this is definitely going to happen. There will come a time here over the next couple of weeks now where I'm going to shave off my entire hair.
It's definitely a look, because I did it 2017 just for competing purposes. I don't really know why. I think when you're in contest prep, sometimes your head goes through funny things. You just make like weird decisions about just things in general. And I was just like, hey, fuck it, I'm going to shave my hair off.
Do you know the movie Bronson with Ed Hardy?
I don't think I do, no.
It's about
Is it a look that you look like?
It's kind of similar then. Okay. Because it's about a movie from it's Charles Bronson. I think he was a criminal in even the UK, quite famous criminal. And he is playing that individual. It's a movie from 2007 or 8, so already a longer time ago. And he has a completely shaved off head with then a mustache, but that mustache is more like curly, you know. But this is probably the look that I'm going for, because he's also a little bit more jacked, you know.
It will look gangster like. People will think you're running like some sort of like, I don't know, drug line or something. I can't remember where I was going, but yeah, it's just, the thing is, I really liked having a shaved head. It was just very convenient. You don't have to worry about your hair in any way, shape or form. And it's kind of like a bit relieving, but at the same time, like tattoos already give you like people already judge a book a little bit by its cover with tattoos, than with a shaved head, double down on that.
Yeah. So let us, because we've talked a little bit about then training, what happened, how I went about it, and I think that it may be then interesting to further elaborate on that, because I had some good and bad observations, which is always good because it improves your skills as a coach, of course, how to go about certain situations, and also it makes you realize that there's always something that you can probably do if you are pre-planning for it. So for example, with then the gym, I knew that I'm going to take a couple of rest days. I don't have the capacity of taking a deload, because there will be now several times where I have to take like 3 to 4 days off, taking a deload now, taking a deload then. It's just too often of a deload. So I had to work around it a little bit, and I had to be a little bit smarter about it and pre-plan. So what it is that I'm going to do now is always planning in like 3 to 4 days of complete rest after those events. I'm probably going to do or get 1 to 2 training sessions in already on Mallorca when we are on a honeymoon, which is something that I didn't plan on doing. And also, when you're then traveling, you can probably find a gym if you have the capacity and the time and energy resources for it. Because what I did, I was arriving and I was going straight into the city. I was going to the hotel where I was staying, asking for a towel. And then I immediately went into the gym, got a training session done, and went straight to the tattoo parlor. Right? And it's just about planning. It's just about preparement. And it's just about what it is that is important to you. Did I have to train? No. I think that it doesn't really make that much of a difference, that one additional training session, but I did it for also my mental well-being, because I knew that if I don't get that session in, it's another day where I can't really train. And for me personally, training is also some form of therapy for me. And I know, Steve, you would be the same. You would have done the same thing.
Yeah, it's almost like you said, it's one session. Like, does it matter in the grand scheme of things? But if you, what's the saying? Like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think that kind of applies here, where it's like, yeah, that's one session. But if you took that attitude every single time it was just one session, how many sessions is that lost across a year, across like a decade then? And how much of a like loss of that is you in terms of your results? And I think it's just like, again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. At least I think that applies within the context of like, how you do approach your training nutrition, like at one time is probably how you're going to approach it every time. The person that's just like, it doesn't matter. Every time an occasion comes up where they think it doesn't matter that much in that acute time period, they're probably going to just give it up. And then in the long term, that could be them just losing out on some gains here and there. And I know for some people it won't matter as much, but probably a lot of the listeners are keen on doing those things. And also, like you said, it maybe isn't even the loss of the potential hypertrophy, it's the loss of like the mental well-being and the feeling that you get from training and how that calms you for the rest of the day and for days following. Like everyone knows that from a deload, when you take time off and you're kind of crazy itching by the end. Like if you can avoid needing that when you don't need it, like if you're not in a psychological state where you're exhausted from training, your motivation's low, when your motivation's high to train and then you kind of pull back, like that's hard then. Yeah. So I get that.
No, absolutely. And it's kind of also the same principle that is applying to nutrition as well. Because I was trying my very best to plan everything, to look up where the supermarkets are so that I can actually do a little bit of shopping, so that when I'm going to the tattoo shop and there's something on the way, that I can pick things up, so that I'm very well prepared for in case that they aren't ordering food for then lunch, which they didn't do. I can have something there, and I have also something for post-workout meal and all that kind of stuff. Were the things that I was planning for. The same also then for the next day when I was leaving again. You can always plan things ahead of time, and it's not that complicated. And Harry Smith, our former coach of Revive Stronger, did a fantastic post about a couple of tips and tricks while traveling, and that is, if you are struggling with tracking things, go with the most simplistic option and just aim to get protein in and vegetables. If you do this, it's very, very hard to get above or over the calories that you're aiming for.
Yeah, if I did that, I'd be in like a severe calorie deficit.
Yeah, that's true.
For sure.
That's true.
It's so funny. Sometimes, yeah, that's on tattoo days, that's when I struggle with appetite big time, especially if I'm trying to mass. So if I'm dieting, it's way, way easier. So actually, and on the note of dieting, I know you posted up a physique shot yesterday and you were kind of asking for I imagine you'd already decided in your head what you're doing, but you did it for the algorithm, for the poll to get some interaction. And you are... How much were you weighing? 76 kilos? Is that around where you are now? Yeah. So and I couldn't believe you've been mini cutting already 4 weeks. That time has
It's coming up to 4 weeks. I didn't really want, just to be absolutely honest with you, Steve, I didn't really want to actually write 3 weeks, because I didn't really want to face the trouble in explaining myself as to why it is that aggressive, or why I'm losing that much weight in such a short period of time, how that is possible. And I don't know. I just wanted to avoid confrontation of like unsolicited feedback. Don't cut for too fast because you're running risk of losing muscle mass or anything like. It's just like, I wanted to avoid this. That's why I said 4 weeks, but I'm first now 3 weeks and 2 days in. So,
on that note, it's similar to when yesterday I posted a iliac clap pull around, and I said, it's probably not perfect, because the reason I said that was because I know I'm going to get some people in my flipping story comments just being like, oh, you should be doing this, and they're going to give me tons of feedback. I'm like, man, please do you not know like who I am? Like, do you not know me? Do you not think I would have tried to make it as good as possible? And so it's just, yeah, I totally get you, where it's like sometimes you protect yourself by either not sharing something, which is sad because you should be able to say it was 3 weeks. You should be able to tell the truth, but sometimes it's just easier to just like again, I said, I posted it and I put up, it's probably not perfect, to try and avoid people trying to give me feedback. Now, people still did, because people are people, and I know they probably mean well, but I just could do without having to just go back to them and go like, yeah, maybe, or yeah, sure. Like, you know what I mean?
That's the thing. Most people don't mean any bad, or they inadvertently give you kind of criticism or feedback that you haven't really asked for, and they come from a good place. But then, I don't know, turning down the criticism or feedback is hard, right? It puts you in the tough spot, even though that you've never asked to be in that tough spot in the first place. You're just basically sharing that information. To be fair, though, if you're posting something that you have always come to terms with, then also some kind of negative criticism or feedback, and you have to live with that, because you can't really put anything out there and just expect that people are on board with you. Now, often, of course, the comments, they may not be as well thought through or thought out. That's totally true, but sometimes you've seen it probably, Steve, in bigger social media accounts. Whenever they get kind of criticism, they just brush it off as haters. It's just like, that's an easy cop-out. Not everyone is hating when they are just pointing out the obvious, for example, right? That has nothing to do with hate. So yeah, I was very much aware of that. There may be people then, but it hasn't really come to that. So it was overwhelming, though, because most people were just like, all right, man, stop the cutting phase, go into a gaining phase. And for me personally, it was also, yes, I agree with that one, because the veins are popping out everywhere. It was actually also going much, much better and faster than I anticipated. There was a couple of days even where it was quite stagnant, and that was right around the tattoo. So before the tattoo and after the tattoo, just due to inflammation probably. Also, I had a little bit of a sunburn, unfortunately, going on, because I was just stupid. That one day I was working out, I was working on my motorbike, and the sun was just burning on me, and I was getting so frustrated, and I just completely forgot about my environment because I was so frustrated. You know this? Sometimes you just forget everything around you.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, you're so, as in you were frustrated on the work you were doing on your motorbike. Yeah, and
that's why probably a little bit of stress already on the system, on the body, and I had a little bit more water retention. And then once I came back from the tattoo, 2 days after arriving back home, I just had a massive flush downwards, where it was like 1.5 kilograms down, and ever since then it's hovering there. It has not come up again, right? And the rate of loss over those weeks has always been at around like 1.2% of our body weight loss per week. So yeah,
I think that's like reasonable within the means of a mini cut for sure, especially a shorter one in particular.
Yeah. I think everything in the... oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, get in and out as quick as possible, rob that fat bank.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everything in the range of 0.75 up to 1.5% of our body weight loss per week for a mini cut on average is absolutely acceptable. Because once again, the first initial weeks, you will feel fine. Once week number 3 to 4 comes around, things will actually start to get much, much tougher. But then the mini cut is nearly over anyway to begin with. You know, and then you can make the decision of maybe pushing for one additional week if you really need to. And if you don't, which I think that I'm very close to it, I wanted to actually go to 75 kilograms or stop it at the beginning of August. And that's why I'm pushing on for another week. And then probably I will be achieving both at the same time. So stopping at the beginning of August and also dipping into the 75s.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this is the first time you've dieted since what, 2021?
Yeah,
it's been a long time. I know there was chunks of time you were maintaining because of like your surgery on your chest, and then various injuries and things I think cropped up that made you maintain. But I guess, and for you, I know you've tried mini cuts in the past, and it's like you weren't ready. Whereas this one, I would presume it's gone so successfully and maybe better than you thought because of previous experience, because you're actually ready for it.
Yeah, but yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you on this one. But the last time that I did a true kind of mini cut, it has already been ages ago. Like, I don't know, 2019 maybe? Can't even recall. Ages ago. And this one was actually quite a smooth ride overall. It's just, as discussed, making some modifications and alterations to what it is that you're eating, but the sheer size of the food that you're consuming and the meals were still relatively the same. And that helps tremendously. And this brings us to one of the parts that was the second observation that I had, and something that I want to address in a couple of seconds. But before we do that, let's take a short break.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
So back again at it. What it is that I wanted to talk about, Steve, and it's something that I've shared with you via WhatsApp already, is the overall lethargy that is that people assume comes with a caloric deficit. But my assumption is that it most of the time is more like a byproduct, or that the deficit is more like a byproduct that contributes to that lethargy rather than it being the sole cause for it. I don't know if you want to start off and actually then talking a little bit about this and what your take is around this.
Yeah, I think you said in the voice note, when you're in a surplus, it kind of gives you buffer. It kind of gives you some security in terms of, okay, if you don't have the best night's sleep, it's okay because you're in a surplus, so you get that like extra buffer. Whereas when you're in a deficit, like you're already in a deficit, so you're already in the opposite. You're not in a buffer, you're in like an actual deficit. So sleep becomes even more important. So if you have the same sleep quality when you're massing versus cutting, just the fact you're now in a deficit, now you're on a back foot. Whereas before you probably wouldn't have noticed it. So I think like just in general, like every variable becomes more important in terms of nutrient timing, in terms of like the amount of carbohydrates you have versus fats. And then sleep and stress management. You can, because you don't have that buffer of the surplus, you feel every element of that more. So if you miss your pre-workout meal before you train when you're dieting, you feel that. Whereas when you're massing, you don't feel it as much. And I still think probably, especially as you get more advanced, you feel those things maybe a little tad more, but especially for more intermediate, less well-trained lifters, yeah, for sure, they don't feel that as much. And like you said there, it's like, when people diet, sometimes sleep quality goes down and then that impacts the diet. And it's like, you just have to really fight to maintain as high a sleep quality as possible. And I see that observationally with people in prep, the people that start sleeping like shit early within like their prep, something's probably under their control. It's like shit just hits the fan so much quicker than it should. And it's always going to hit the fan eventually, but the longer you can maintain high quality sleep, and I know this personally, 2021 prep, the majority of the time felt real good. And that's because I had such a large focus on sleep versus previous preps where I just didn't really think too much about it past blue light blockers. And that's all I did in 2017. So yeah, I definitely think it's such a good point.
I think you brought up a good example that led me to an analogy. And that is, let's say you have a budget for the day. Each and every single person has kind of a budget for the day, monetarily speaking, right? If you have £1,000 on a daily basis and going into the supermarket, it doesn't really make a huge difference. You don't really even feel it that much in your total amount of budget that you have available on a daily basis. If though you only have £100 to play with, then of course, going to the supermarket is already maybe 50% of what it is that you can spend for the day. And it's kind of the same here as well. You have a certain amount of budget that is maybe in the form of energy resources and time availability maybe as well. And when you're then in a caloric deficit, that budget shrinks, and it costs even more if you're then sleep deprived. Right? The entry for sleep deprivation is paying a higher price this time, inflation, whatever, And what I think that many people have is they think that the caloric deficit leads to them feeling lethargic, when in reality, it's most of the time, at least from my personal observation, external factors such as higher stress, higher physical demand due to job, occupation, whatever, and or worse sleep overall, or maybe a combination of those combined. And then put on top, of course, the budget that you have, of course, then you make draw the conclusion that the caloric deficit is the reason for why you are feeling lethargic, but often it's the other things. And if you take care of the other things, the caloric deficit actually becomes more manageable and easier to deal with. You have less hunger overall, etc., etc. And it's something that I've even noticed now over those couple of days. It wasn't the reason as to why I thought about this. It was more like because a client of mine was asking how or whether the caloric deficit is the reason for why he feels lethargic overall. And I said to him, it's probably other factors, but I felt it myself because over the past 3 to 4 days, my sleep wasn't the greatest. Before the tattoo appointment, the mini cut was going so easy, so smoothly. And ever since the tattoo and my sleep deprivation was higher and my body was also going through a more tough time, I'm feeling way more lethargic. I have also elevated hunger due to that. And those two are intertwined, of course, as well.
Yeah, that's it's the horrible part. Like, sleep is so important. It's like putting your phone on charge when it's like near empty. If you don't charge it up fully for the day, like when your phone is then like nearly on empty throughout like the rest of the day, I don't know, you forget to put your phone on charge basically, or you only put it on half the night. Like then you're just running on empty all through the day and you're tempted to need to charge it more often, i.e. have like snacks and things. And yeah, just rounds you out to how important just the fundamental of like sleep is. And then it's just tricky because you also, and I've been there and I don't think I'm there now, people then obsess about, they're like, oh man, Steve and Pascal said how important sleep is. That's like the thing that's really going to help me diet and have a successful fat loss phase. But then they get really worried that their sleep's not going to be great. And then they hyper focus on it and then they end up hurting their sleep. And it's like, you just have to like do your best under those circumstances. It's kind of like stressing loads about trying to lose fat, and then the stress leads to your scale weight maintaining, and then the scale weight maintaining stresses you out more. And it's like, if you just chilled out, focused on the process, the scale weight would probably just come down eventually. Like you hit a plateau and then you saw a whoosh. You just knew that whoosh was bound to happen because you're hungry, you're in a big deficit. Like it just has to happen.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you on this. And the funny thing is that I'm not even worrying about those variables anymore. In the past, I was always trying to micromanage and always trying to control as many variables as I thought that I could. But some things are just outside of my control, and some things don't even make that much of a difference, even if I think that I control them. So for example, sleep, I'm trying to get proper sleep in. It's not that I'm not trying, right? I'm trying to go to bed at the same time under the same circumstances, and that has been a habit that has been formed already. And if then shitty sleep happens, I can't do anything about it because I've already optimized my sleep environment, which should be the norm in it for itself. It shouldn't first be taken care of when his shit hits the fan. It's kind of the same when it comes to nutritional habits as well. You should, in my opinion, eat most of the time relatively clean. There are, of course, exceptions to the rules. Eat according to your goals and according to your position. That's probably a better way in putting things, especially for you, Steve, because you're eating 4,000 calories. You can't just eat broccoli, rice, and chicken. Man, that would be horrendous. You have to actually then have hot cross buns or something like this in order to get to your calories. And that's totally all right. But But you should have the fundamental things already in place. And when then something happens, it just happens. Yeah. And then you don't have to stress about it. You just, tomorrow is another day. You hope and you try to do a better job.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And sometimes, that's actually always what happens. Like if you have, sometimes when you're dieting, you just have a day where you're like, man, I'm hungry today. I don't know what it is. I haven't changed anything. I am hungry. But then the next day, easy. Yep. And it's just, you have those hard days. Same with training. Sometimes you can do everything right to set yourself up for a great session. But you just go in there and you're like, I am just not feeling it today. I'm just going to do like what I need to do and get out. And so, like the opposite happens too, where you're just like I had it on Saturday. I was just like, man, I am feeling it today. Last Saturday, I was not. But this session, it's gone much better than I was expecting. And it's just, you have to don't over celebrate your wins and don't like over concern about your losses. Try and be more in that middle where you're just like, I accept a win because I know there's going to be a loss. I accept the loss. As long as you've got more wins than losses, hopefully over the long term. Yeah.
And also to put another spin on it, you're not expecting to always have the most fantastic sessions on a daily basis, right? So why then do we put such a huge emphasis on the days where we don't really feel that great? Because often we put a lot of emphasis and stock on them when we are super hungry and we stress about it, think about it more so, which then leads down a different pathway where we're then overly stressed even more so. Just continue with your habits that you have built, and then tomorrow will probably look a little bit different. Right? That's the way that I go about it, and it causes such a relief of stress overall to not constantly stress and think about those variables that in reality we can't really change or think of or manipulate too much anyway.
Yeah, and I think sometimes in those situations where you really aren't feeling it, for example, I don't know, maybe you have a 10,000 step count and you are at, 7,000 and you just feel completely wiped and you're just like, man, I got to get these 3,000 steps in or something. In the past, I definitely would have been on the opinion like, no, get that 10,000 steps.
Just wanted to say, if you're not bringing that one up, I would have brought it up that you would have been someone who definitely goes out, even in the apartment, getting the steps in, you know?
Yeah, when I had COVID and I remember you had to tell me to lie down, I was like, okay, I will. Because I was trying to get my steps in the apartment, 10,000 steps with a weighted vest on. So while having COVID, like that was not
and no
ideal.
Treadmill or anything alike.
No, it was just walking up and down or jogging on the spot. And I think a lot of us are driven that way. But now I've got to the point, and I think you got there much before me, Pascal, which is a good thing, where you're able to just accept it like, hey, today is not the day to try and stress about getting 3,000 steps in. And as I've done that more and more, like on days where maybe I'm a bit more hungry and I have an extra 100, 200 calories, the next day I'm like, I'm not hungry. I can bring those calories that I had extra yesterday back down. Or with steps, I feel good today. I can get those extra steps that I lost, rather than like really stressing on that day. And then that probably has a knock-on negative effect the next day as well. So I think it's like picking and choosing your battles, like a little bit striking when it's hot and chilling out when it's not. Obviously, there's a range to that. Like you don't want to go, I was meant to hit 10,000 steps and I hit 0. You probably want to get somewhere towards it, but like just take what your body's giving you. Don't push yourself outside of that like stress zone where it's like, this is now just like, there's eustress and then there's just negative stress that's not going to be productive. And it's hard to know where that is, but you get better and better at it.
That's also why I'm not the biggest fan of convincing yourself that you need any kind of refeeds or diet breaks, especially spontaneously, because there will be a day in a diet, most of the time, if you're not a very skillful dieter already, where you wake up, you are very hungry, you have some cravings, and you start to convince yourself like, it's going to be a good idea to actually refeed. I'm lethargic. My energy levels are low. It is just because my body needs me to actually have higher caloric intake. And then you make some kind of mental masturbation and justifications in your own head that sound good to you so that you can get away with having now a refeed. And what I'm a bigger fan of is if you really, really have a hard time with hunger on that day, then go to the kitchen, maybe get a carrot and eat that carrot. Or cucumber.
Sorry,
or
that
whatever.
Sounded funny now.
But it really is this, because tomorrow also, once again, things will probably look differently again. And if you started and justified having a refeed day, then chances are tomorrow you will feel bad about it and think, fuck, I was actually not that hungry that it justified having a higher caloric day. And now I've wasted a little bit of time that I need to make up now. And if you just had low calorie snacks, which there are plenty of, and you don't need to go wild on those, because that is also something that I wouldn't recommend. Otherwise you experience some kind of digestive issues, which then causes some other issues. But it's kind of like, man, have a handful of cocktail tomatoes and maybe a carrot, and you should already feel much, much better afterwards. Right? And if you don't, then it has mostly something to do with cravings and a psychological desire of eating more, rather than a physical demand of needing to have more sitting in your digestive tract.
Yeah, and I think that you highlight a good point there, because some people could have taken it like that. Oh, if you feel a bit tired, don't go and train. Oh, if you're feeling like you're a bit hungry on a diet, go and have like a refeed. And it's like, that's why I said there's like a range there. You have to be careful not to step too far in that direction. It's like, if we feel tired, Pascal, we go train. If we feel a little bit under the weather, we're going train. If we're trashed with COVID, we still maybe think that we should, but no, that's probably a situation where we shouldn't, type of thing, you know?
Yeah. Which
So
isn't always to say that we are super smart about it. We are the adults, the mature people or so, but the experience for sure pays off in most of those situations, because we did our due diligence of shitty things that most listeners, I wish, do not do, because they are listening. Because they don't have to. That's how we evolve as a species of
from
humans.
our mistakes.
Exactly. It would be awful if we always need to do the same mistakes in order to actually move forward.
And that's something I did recently, where we spoke about it, where I pushed my mesocycle for 6 weeks. I took 3 days off, and I thought, I'll just test it and see if I can get back into the gym. And I learned my lesson. I was burnt out for like 3 weeks, where I was just grinding myself into the dirt, and I felt systemically trashed every single day. And it was like, that wasn't smart. Like you can't do that. And it was good, like teaching for myself that like, actually what I'd been doing in the past was the right kind of solution to the problem, or to the thing I was trying to achieve.
Sometimes we need that little bit of a confirmation. It's kind of the same with a relationship, you know? It's so easy to get used to that environment of always having someone by your side that you normally appreciate, but you don't show that appreciation anymore, because out of habits or out of just not thinking about it. And whenever you are then away, or that person is away for a couple of days, you realize like, oh, man, I need that person by my side, even if it's for selfish reasons, because you think that you need that person. You start to appreciate that then again, and you just needed that little bit of distance, a little bit of confirmation again.
Pascal, I'm going to flip this on its head a little bit. We talked about Peter Fitchen earlier, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I don't think you've listened to the episode yet, have you?
Not yet, no.
No, so I don't know if you know, but he kept his prep this season quiet, so he didn't tell anyone about it. Like, he was, even in the gym, he was wearing like big jumpers and hoodies, so no one knew. He did. He basically told like his partner, Cliff, and his two coaches, and no one else knew about it. He even went on podcasts and spoke to people, and they asked him when he's competing, and he was like, I don't know. And he had like death face. And it made me think of your 2021 prep, where it wasn't like it was a prep, but wasn't a prep. You kind of like, it was something you somewhat kept yourself, and you weren't even sure if you were going to compete. And a lot of the pros that Pete talked about, we kind of spoke about some of them earlier, where you were like, I mini cut and I did it for 4 weeks because you didn't want the backlash potentially that people would give you, like the unsolicited feedback. And it really appealed to me, keeping prep quiet. And I'm like, I don't know how I'd be able to do it. Like and I don't know what your thoughts are on it and what your plans were in terms of competing and documenting that process or not. But it made me consider trying to keep more of that stuff private, because I think it does stress me. I think it stresses me because I feel pressure to share it also, but also when I do share it, I feel like you have eyes on you and it's a bit of judgment. And I don't know if I like that pressure or not. So I don't know if I feel like you'll have some thoughts on it.
But I don't know if my thoughts are well warranted, to be honest. It's just, of course, my opinion, right? And if you ask people for their opinion, most of the time they have something to say, even though that they haven't really given it any kind of thought. So I come at it from different perspectives. For one, it depends on your personality, of whether you are an introvert or extrovert, whether you take pleasure in the maybe appreciation of others, the comments of others. Maybe it even sparks some energy, because some people take very much pride and energy from negative comments of like, holy shit, yes, now I'm going to prove it to them. And also in regards to then, what is it that you're doing for a living? And I think that you are a coach, but also, of course, a content creator. So I think that it can be quite beneficial to log this journey, to put yourself out there and to have it publicly available for the vast majority of people. At the same time, though, you're of course not obliged to share that. You could easily, because I think the vast majority of content creators who are also bodybuilders at the same time see an opportunity there. And it's also kind of cool to share, because you have a purpose. You have a red line through each and every post that you're making, because it's mostly then about prep, about dieting, about training, and all that kind of stuff. So this gives you some form that where people know what they are then getting from you, which is good and important for content production. Because if you were to ask a content creator, what is it that you're doing? And he says like, content? I don't know, right? And you have nothing to stand for. It becomes very hard to sell, of course, as a content creator. But you don't have to put yourself out there like this, and you don't have to then put all of the content around the contest prep, which is harder to do, I think, because your mind spins around contest prep a little bit more, and the things that you can think of content production are mostly then contest prep related. But if you don't, I think that people wouldn't even notice that much.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I know when I get into prep, my content is heavily driven around it. In terms of stories, Instagram, but also podcasts. Like I'll end up doing peak week podcasts.
Exactly.
Bringing on competitors and stuff. And I'm like, but do I want that? Is there something really refreshing about everything else in my life not being surrounded by contest prep? And so I can kind of switch off from it more. It's kind of on the back burner, as I put it, to Pete, versus like always on the forefront of your mind. And so I wondered if having your last prep, where there wasn't much talk about it, of you competing until like the final month, maybe into the show, if you felt like, versus other times when maybe you've announced that you're competing that year at the start of the year, if that felt like you felt some benefits towards that, or
I think I'm too small to actually tell.
Okay.
I don't think that enough people are interested in what it is that I'm doing, that it has an impact on me. And that, I think it's quite a different story with you, Steve, because you have like, what is it now? 70,000 followers over on Instagram. Almost.
69. It's a great number.
And this alongside then, of course, being the podcast host of Revive Stronger podcast. We have nearly 40,000 subscribers over on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do it now, so that we are getting and reaching the 40,000. And with that being said, I think that, of course, there's a little bit of a different attention on you, and also maybe a little bit of a different pressure that you're putting on yourself, eventually on you as well. Whereas for me personally, I'm first and foremost getting older. So that also means that I'm giving less fucks about what other people think about me. It's just a matter of fact. And I have the feeling that it really has to do with age, that you more so care about what your family, how your family sees you, how your family is doing, and how your friends are perceiving you and how your friends are doing, instead of caring about what other people that you don't even know think about you. Whereas when you're younger, you're still seeking for appreciation of new peers, and you are still trying to find a group that you belong to and all that kind of stuff, which then makes it a little bit harder. And I'm just getting older, and I'm not as invested into the entire journey that it's that important to me as it is for you. You have a bigger following, it's more important to you, and you are a little bit younger still. And I think that these things play into it and makes it harder to then come up with the appropriate decision around this, in my opinion.
I guess, and then on the final note of this discussion, do you have any, I know we've last time spoken, we were like discussing next year to compete. Is that still like an idea that's in your mind? It's not like you're not set on anything.
I don't know. I have to see how the back piece is actually then impacting my tattoo and my muscle mass. Like, honestly, I always wanted my back piece. It was planned. Well, I was in touch with the tattoo artist already at the beginning of the year, but I said no to it because we got the dog during that time, and I was simply not willing and ready to do it. And then this time, there was just a great opportunity, and that's why I took it this time. And then I have to see how this impacts my entire physique. I don't know. That's why I can't really speak to it right now. But to get back to then the point about logging the contest prep, when you have those doubts, I think that you have already somewhat of an incline, and that incline is probably not logging it, I would assume, because otherwise you wouldn't have brought it up and wouldn't have talked about it. Well, what's your current? Have you thought about it? Have you thought about it a lot? Have you thought about the potential consequences that it could have from logging it and not logging it, etc.? What's your sentiment?
Yeah, I think I've probably overthought it, and it's not as big a deal as what it's in my head. I think that generally, like, you can share it and switch off from the comments if you choose to. Like, it's just whether or not I'm good enough at that. And also, I think there's a little bit of just part of me that has logged my entire bodybuilding journey. And so I've always enjoyed that aspect of sharing it with people. But just recently, experimenting with, I guess, talking about the mini cut that I'm doing now less, and not really, talking about it on any posts, actually, only here where we've really talked about it. And I've enjoyed that. It's just like happening, and I don't need to talk about it. And it's kind of allowed me to just, it feels less like I am doing that, if that makes sense. So yeah, maybe I'll experiment with maybe logging it, but less, and not like making it everything, and like find a middle ground, if you know what I mean, where it's like, yeah, I'll talk about it here or there, but ultimately it's not Steve and everything I am, and not make it all encompassing of my life. And every podcast episode has to be about it, where maybe even on the improvement season, we don't talk about it that much. Maybe I just choose not to. And maybe I can find like a bit of a middle ground where I can get the best of both worlds. I'm not sure about it still.
Yeah. I can only speak for myself, Steve. When I was starting to follow you, which was over on Snapchat in 2015 or I think it was 2015, could it be? I was very much enjoying when you've talked about your journey, your experiences, and your observations and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the vast majority of people who follow you appreciate that. And I think that there's only a handful, maybe, who look upon you in a negative way and want you to not succeed. But I think that the vast majority enjoy the entire journey that you have logged so far, and being able to even go back and seeing that entire journey unfold. And if you were to stop, of course, personal preferences, once again, they change. Only because you did things in the past doesn't mean that you have the capacity or desire, energy, resources to do it in the future. But just coming from me personally, and I would assume that I speak for a lot of people out there, I think it would be great if you still continue to log those things. But this is not putting planting any kind of ideas in your head.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's something I'm still mulling over. And I think I'd also struggle. Pete said he took some crazy photos as he was lean, and he was like, fuck, I can't share this because I'm not telling anyone about my prep. And I'm like, I wouldn't like that. Like, if I've got a photo and I'm like, man, that's gnarly, I want to show people that because I'm so proud, I'd be like, fuck it, I'm posting it.
It is sometimes a cool thing, right? So for example, with the veiny thing as well, where I've just posted, oh man, I look crazy right now, the veins popping out everywhere, so let me just post it and do a poll.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you want to share that because it's a proud moment, and people will be interested in it. It's quite cool. And I think it's just the amount that you share, that's what you can kind of play with to Like you don't have to, I know John Jewett, for example, like he would put out like his macros, his like steps and like every little detail, which is really cool. But then that invites questions and it's like, do you want all those questions or not? Like if you can just take them and it doesn't really mean much, cool. And ultimately, I think it's just being confident in who you are, your process. And I think, like you said, as I get older, I am more of those things. And so I think it gets easier. But it was just interesting to hear Pete, the first prep he's ever not shared. And he was like, I'm not going to share future preps because it was that productive for me. So you might listen to it and it might brew some additional thoughts. And I'm really sad at the idea that I don't know if that was you kind of saying that depending on how the back piece looks, you might not ever compete again.
Could be. I don't know.
I'm sad at that thought because I really like the idea of stepping on stage with you.
Yeah, for sure, man. Absolutely. There are, of course, things that I would then be sad about, but also things that I don't really care about. You know, not care. So I find it funny and also cool to get lean. I have an easier time getting lean than building muscle mass. That's for sure. But if I ever were to not needing to go to extreme territories of leanness and by that possibly impacting my family, I would be absolutely fine with that. You know, these are just thoughts that also spring to my mind as well. Whereas then there are other things such as stepping on stage together, having just a fun time, like being at a bodybuilding show I very much enjoyed. Competing is just fun in general, and spending the time there with like-minded individuals and having a great time. These are things, right? And that's why right now I'm indifferent about this. But this is also how I was back in 2021. Even when I've prepped, I was indifferent about kind of the show itself. I always wanted to do this. I found the thought that we are doing things together very appealing. I thought like, hey man, I can do this in a short period of time, right? Also very nice. So for me personally, and I know that this sounds a little bit wrong for some people who are very passionate about contest prep and also competing. For me personally, it's not that big of a deal because competing or me training and taking care of nutrition, I'm not doing this in order to compete. Competing is just like, if it's there, it's there. If not, totally fine.
Yeah, I totally respect the impact on like your family and everything like that. And it's even the fact you could get like this would be a very good idea, I think. Like when you get pretty lean, maybe not even stage lean, you might decide just to do like a photo shoot, because I reckon that would look unreal with the tattoos. Like they would definitely enhance the photo shoot. You could get some crazy shots that they could go viral on Instagram. Like those type of shots. Like you with shredded glutes and your back piece. That would just look ridiculous. Like
I would look like because just as information, I'm getting Titans from Attack on Titans on my back, and they have like, of course, the muscles showing. And if you then had kind of very, very striated glutes, it would just be another Titan or piece of a Titan.
And you can, like your glutes like came in like well good, and they could come in better probably too.
Yeah,
so,
probably.
Yeah, that would just look like you shredded with all that on would just look like some kind of crazy. It might not be the most competitive physique for stage, but it would definitely look like.
And that's the thing, right? In the end, if I decide to do this another time, it's more like the same as 2021. I'm just doing it. Right? And you could make the argument of like, it doesn't really matter what your back is looking like.
Yeah. Or
because
even if
I have no aspirations of trying to turn pro, trying to get a certain spot in the rankings or so. It's more about kind of the experience of competing, which for some sounds odd. But for me, it's just, I don't know, I like the entire experience.
Yeah, I think it's the reality for the majority of competitors. Like you have to at least, everyone should go in with the idea of enjoying it and doing it for the experience, because there are no guaranteed placings for anyone.
I have to say though, I still believe that you should belong up there. Whatever this means, right? In regards then to taking into consideration the competitiveness on the people around you, because I would never really compete, even though that I have no ambitions of placing a certain way or so. if I don't really belong up there, where it's just like I have flabby glutes, have like a, I don't know, fat belly and all that kind of stuff. To me personally, and I know that also this sounds a little bit harsh to some people, I don't think that you then belong on a bodybuilding stage, because it does a disservice to the sport and also the audience who's paying for seeing bodybuilders, and not just like, I don't know, going to the gym and taking off the shirt and that's it. You know where I'm coming from, Steve, with this?
Yes, I've definitely noticed some competitors who will compete as part of a transformation. So they're like be maybe heavily obese and their diet down, and they will still be 10, 20 pounds from any sort of stage condition, maybe lots of loose skin, and big respect to those people. But I don't think a bodybuilding show is the best place to show that, and maybe just like doing your own photo shoot where you can like get some really nice photos, and you don't have to put yourself on stage to be judged against people that it's like, there's just no comparison because you aren't at that level just yet.
That is my opinion on the matter as well. I think that you have so much more even in return from a proper photo shoot rather than stepping on stage. What's the necessity of stepping on stage in a scenario like this? In itself, it's a bodybuilding show, right? And yes, you can even go as far as saying like, yeah, but he did bodybuilding, right? He did transform and all that kind of stuff. But I think we all have a certain standard and a certain image in our head what bodybuilding is supposed to look like on stage, at least. And I wouldn't go to a football match paying for something and then see, I don't know, amateurs play there. Like, people who have never really played, I would be pissed off. I want to see the professional people playing like proper football. You know, it may not be the most appropriate comparison, but for me personally, if I then step on stage, even with then a full back piece or so, I still want to know that, for example, my glutes, they are just like nutcrackers, and also my quads have the total separation, so that people would still say, yes, he has a lot of tattoos and he's being downrated by it because we don't really see a lot of muscle separation or the details on the Christmas tree and all that kind of stuff to that extent. But we know he has like, he did his work, he did his homework, he did his due diligence in order to be up there with the other competitors.
Yeah, and that actually happened when I judged at the WNBF first time. Is there was a guy maybe from Italy or somewhere from Europe, and he was heavily tattooed, but he was very lean. He definitely deserved to be up there, but yeah, it definitely hid some details on his physique. But I wonder how much you can do, like I said, with the tanning product that Pete brought up, which I've forgotten the name of again, which you'll remind me of. Dream Tan.
A Dream Tan, yeah.
And I wonder how much you can do.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, if you're openly discussing things with maybe the organizers and say like, hey, this is me.
Especially if you're unique like yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. This is me. Can you advise on what to do and how I can still participate to the best of my abilities while giving you the opportunity to judge me in the best way possible, so that you don't have to try to see some definition. What is it that we can do? I think so. I'm a big proponent of communication in general, and also there's no harm. You can reach out to the organizers, to the judges, and ask like, hey, this is me. What can we do? Possibly, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And any way I can encourage you to consider jumping back on the stage, just selfishly, of course, because I know it can impact other things, and I completely respect your kind of whatever you decide to do. But yeah, from a selfish perspective, it's a lot of fun when we both get to do the damn thing. And
that's true. And I would still love to stand beside you. I don't know if we were to be in the same weight class though, unless it's high class, that's good. But if it was weight class dependent, I don't think that we would end up in the same weight class, unfortunately.
No, that's unlikely.
Yeah.
We should probably call it, shouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's over an hour now.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, guys, for staying up to this point. Lots of tattoo talk here in this episode. But as always, I really do hope that you enjoy our rambles. If you do, then as always, leave a comment, leave a like, leave a subscribe if you haven't done so already. It always supports us. And also, once again, because I've talked about that true crime podcast that I'm listening to, and some people were complaining that they talk too much at the beginning of the podcast with unnecessary information and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering, we do the same, and maybe we should stop it and talk more about fitness again. I don't know. Let me know, guys, in the comment section below what you think about this, and then we consider it for the next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Give us your feedback, positive, negative. It all helps the algorithm. So
absolutely. Cheers.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.